All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are breaking down what is, without a doubt, one of the most complex and consequential military scenarios on the entire planet. We're talking about China's potential invasion of Taiwan. You've got this colossal offensive force on one side, and a really defiant island defense on the other. So, at the heart of this whole thing are two huge questions. First, how would China even begin to launch what would be the largest amphibious assault in modern history? And second, when you're faced with those kinds of odds, how could a small island like Taiwan possibly defend itself? That's what we're gonna unpack. Okay, here's how we're gonna break it all down. First, we'll look at the perilous strait itself. Then we'll dig into China's invasion plan, both by air and sea, followed by the amphibious onslaught. After that, we'll look at the plan's big weak spot, its Achilles heel. Then we'll flip to Taiwan's clever porcupine strategy. And we'll wrap it all up by asking, is the cost just too high? All right, first things first, let's talk about the context for this whole standoff, the perilous strait. You know, this is so much more than just a military what-if. It's a fundamental clash of wills. I mean, on one side, you've got Beijing's decades-long, really deeply held ambition of what it calls reunification. And on the other side, you have Taiwan's absolute determination to defend its way of life. It's this political stalemate that's fueling one of the most intense and, honestly, dangerous military buildups you'll find anywhere on Earth. So if the order were actually given, how would it all begin? Well, let's get into the People's Liberation Army's opening moves. It's a massive operation designed to completely dominate the air and the sea. Now, you might think an invasion starts with ships leaving port, but that's not how this would go down. The first wave would be totally invisible. Step one is all about the mind games, psychological operations. We're talking propaganda, deception, big shows of force, anything to try and break Taiwan's will to fight before the shooting even starts. Then comes the physical assault. Step two would be just a massive barrage of missiles and airstrikes. The goal here is to basically decapitate Taiwan's defenses, take out their airfields, their command centers, their naval assets, everything. They want total control of the air and sea before a single soldier even thinks about crossing that strait. And this is really telling. This table, which is based on analysis from the U.S. Naval War College, kind of gives us a peek into the PLA's own confidence levels. Look at this. They feel pretty good, high confidence, about controlling the sea and the air right over Taiwan. But, and this is the key part, notice how overall air control drops to moderate. What does that tell us? It suggests that while they think they can win the initial fight, they know that holding that control, especially if other countries get involved, is a whole different ballgame. A much bigger, much more uncertain challenge. Okay, so once those opening shots have been fired and they believe they have control, we get to the main event, the amphibious onslaught. This is the part where they actually have to cross the strait. And let me tell you, this would not be a simple beach charge. The invasion force is this really complex mix of different units, and they all have a very specific job to do. You've got the Army's amphibious brigades, and the Marines, they're your main beach assault force. But at the exact same time, you'd have the Airborne Corps dropping in behind the lines, trying to grab key spots like ports and airfields, and all the while, Special Ops Forces would be on the ground creating chaos and trying to mess up Taiwan's defenses. But here's the thing. China's actual military transport fleet, it's nowhere near big enough for an invasion on this scale. So what's the solution? Well, it's a strategy they call military-civil fusion. This is wild. They plan to mobilize hundreds of civilian ships. We're talking huge ferries and cargo ships, the kind you can just drive a tank right onto, and basically press them into military service to haul troops and gear across the strait. And these civilian ships are way more than just troop transports. They are the logistical backbone of the entire operation. They'd be carrying fuel, supplies, ammunition, you name it. They'd even be used as engineering platforms to repair ports or to create fake targets to confuse Taiwanese radar. Some could even be turned into makeshift helicopter landing pads. It's a huge, complex part of the plan. But an operation this huge, this complex, it has a massive potential weakness, a real Achilles heel. And it all comes down to logistics. And look, that's not just my opinion. Check out this quote from a major U.S. Naval War College analysis. It says, at present, the PLA remains logistically unprepared for a large-scale invasion of Taiwan. I mean, think about that. Despite all the ships, all the missiles, all the soldiers, the conclusion is they're just not ready from a logistics standpoint. That's a pretty stunning assessment. So let's dig into why that is. Okay, so there are some major hurdles. First, fuel, just staggering amounts of it. Over 70% of all the supplies they'd need would just be fuel. Second, casualties. The PLA fully expects to take very high losses, but they have a serious shortage of combat medics and medical facilities. Third, just the sheer challenge of resupply. Trying to move all that stuff across 100 miles of water while you're being shot at, that's a logistical nightmare. And finally, there's the bigger picture. China is heavily reliant on imported oil, which makes its entire war machine vulnerable to a blockade. So let's hop across the strait. Taiwan knows all of this. They know they can't go toe-to-toe, tank for tank, or ship for ship. It's just not possible. So they've developed a defense specifically designed to exploit all those weaknesses we just talked about. It's famously known as the porcupine strategy. The whole idea is simple, but really powerful. Think about it. A porcupine doesn't try to kill a lion. It just makes itself so spiky and painful to attack that the lion gives up and goes somewhere else. That's the goal here. Not to win in the traditional sense, but to make an invasion so costly, so bloody, that Beijing decides the price is just way too high to pay. And you have to understand, this is a huge departure from a traditional military strategy. A traditional defense would be all about buying big, expensive things like fighter jets and destroyers and tanks. But what's the problem with that? Those are the exact things that are likely to get blown up in the very first moments of a conflict. So the porcupine strategy says, forget that. It relies on a totally different set of tools. So what are we talking about here? We're talking thousands of smaller, mobile, but very lethal systems, things you can hide. Think truck-mounted anti-ship missiles that can drive into the mountains, shoulder-fired anti-air missiles that can be used in a city, tons of sea mines to turn those landing beaches into death traps, fast attack boats, and of course, swarms of drones to constantly harass the invasion force. The whole point is that these things are numerous, they're hard to find, and they're designed to survive that first big attack and then just inflict a death by 1,000 cuts. So what you end up with is this incredible scenario. An immense offensive force about to run headlong into a very determined, very painful defense. And this brings us to the ultimate strategic question. But there's one final and frankly chilling complication to consider. It comes from a former U.S. Defense Intelligence official, Lonnie Henley. He makes the point that even if the beach invasion fails, the war doesn't just magically end. The PLA has another very powerful card left to play. What he's saying is that this isn't an all-or-nothing bet for Beijing. A failed landing doesn't mean game over. The conflict could just change. It could shift from a hot invasion to a long, grinding blockade. They could just surround the island with ships and planes and slowly try to strangle Taiwan's economy and cut it off from the world. It's a different kind of war, but it could be just as devastating. Which brings us to the final, really sobering question we have to ask. When you consider the immense power of the invasion force, but also the painful, determined defense waiting for it, and the fact that there are multiple paths to a truly catastrophic outcome, whether it's a bloody beach assault or a slow, grinding blockade, you have to wonder, is the true cost of this war, for absolutely everyone involved, just too high to pay?